Alrighty, so my name is Dave Goel. I'm a first year master's student at the University of Alberta, and I work with Dr. Matthew Guzdial. And I know it's a long title, but I promise by the end it'll make sense. So, what is player experience modeling? The field, it's basically regarding the construction of computational models that predict player experience. What is player experience? We're defining it as the way players feel at any point of time. For our research, we're specifically looking at player tension or player affect, so how tense a player can get at any point of time. Existing approaches include subjective PEMs. I'll just call it PEMs instead of player experience models. Gameplay-based PEMs and objective PEMs. Subjective PEMs rely on surveys and questionnaires that the participants have to fill after they complete the game. Alternatively, they can also provide a continuous input during their gameplay session. This can happen if they're playing the game with one hand and controlling some sort of a knob or a dial to give their attention values or report their attention values. You also have gameplay-based PEMs, which are more hand-authored, in which the developers define a set of rules, and then they're specialized to each game, and those rules give out attention value. And finally, you have objective PEMs, which rely on sensors. Here, the participants are hooked on to some sensors like PPG or EDA, which can measure your heart rate, ECG, skin conductance, and we get the attention values from those sensor readings. Unfortunately, all the current approaches have some drawbacks. Subjective PEMs, they're not really that reliable because when the participants are giving direct continuous input, it can be obtrusive because their concentration can divert from the actual game. And surveys sometimes cannot always be feasible because it's hard to get people for surveys. For gameplay-based PEMs, they're usually hand-authored, right? So you can't generalize them across all games since you have to specialize them for the game that you're making. And objective PEMs, again, you can't expect to just hook sensors onto people, right? It's not really that feasible. So what do we do? Here's our proposed solution. Let's play videos. So for those who don't know what Let's Play videos are, Let's Players are YouTubers or Twitch streamers who play games on, who stream games. We believe that their volume or their audio input gives us a lot of information about the tension. Here you can see XQC just smashing his desk and Markiplier shouting at a very tense moment. So we believe that their volume at any point of time they're playing a game, that can give us information about the tension. So our proposed pipeline is that we're going to use this volume as a label for our player experience model. Next, we're going to go into our system overview. We're going to use Angry Birds as our testing game. The reason why we chose Angry Birds, I'll get to it in a second. We collected all our videos from YouTube. We collected around 8 of them. So here's the Let's Play video, and we extracted 4 frames per second. The reason why we extracted 4 frames for each second was the average human reaction time is about 0.25 seconds. And so if you divide 1 second by 0.25, you get 4 frames. So once these frames were extracted, we passed them to an AlexNet. The AlexNet was the first deep convolutional neural network model that was a categorical model, and it suited our needs. We did make some modifications to the architecture in that the original AlexNet, it returned a categorical vector that gave a vector of 1000 tensors, but we only wanted one tension value. So we added another linear layer so that you finally got an affect value between 0 and 1. We also wanted to process the audio so that we could get our labels. So we took the same Let's Play video and we extracted the 0.25 audio chunks These corresponded to the frames that we extracted, and we applied some noise reduction to it so that you could only hear the let's player. We didn't want any game noise or any other background noise. And finally, we normalized these values so that we got the amplitude or loudness values, which was between 0 and 1. So we hoped that this would work, but this had a problem. This approach had a problem. When let's players are playing games, either they're like shouting or sometimes they're like really, really focused, right? During tense points, as you can see in the image. And we didn't really account for that. So the solution to this was that we passed our amplitude values through this function. Um, the x there is the amplitude values, and what this led us to was either when the amplitude is like super low or when it's super high, then the tension is really high. But if the amplitude is around the zero point 0.5 mid range, then the tension value is low. So we got the desired behavior that we wanted. And again, here's our final model. For each second, we're extracting 4 frames. We're passing it through the AlexNet plus a linear layer, and we're using the amplitude value passed to the cosine function to use as a label. To test this out, we used a human subject study. We use science birds to test this out. And okay, this brings us back to Angry Birds. The reason we used Angry Birds was that Science Birds was available to us. For those who don't know, Science Birds is a test bed that is basically an Angry Birds clone, and it has a bunch of levels there. You might recognize these logos. The left one is an objective PEM logo, and the right one is a subjective PEM. This is because we wanted to use a combination of an objective and a subjective PEM as a ground truth to compare our player experience model against. We used PPG and EDA sensors for our objective model, and we used a survey for our subjective PEM. PPG sensors, they're attached to your finger and they measure your heart rate. Apple Watch uses them if you've worn one. And EDA sensors, they measure your skin conductance and they're attached to your palm. These are the 3 levels that we picked from Science Words. The only thing that we wanted to make sure was that one level stuck out in terms of tension. So level 2, when we were picking the levels, we wanted level 2 to be of higher tension, overall tension than level 1 and level 3. For the subjective PEM or the questionnaire, the participants were asked to rank all the 3 levels after they were done with their playthrough. Additionally, they also had an emotional state assessment where they had to fill a bunch of Likert range questions expressing how content, tense, sad, etc. they were for each level. We'll go through the table. And we also asked them for their demographic information. So here is the demographic information. There were a total of 13 participants. The majority of them played video games daily, and they were in the age group of 18 to 24. So the main takeaway is that they were all, not all, but majority, they were regular gamers. So the actual results are on the paper, but I'll give you what the takeaways are. The PPG sensor, which was a heart rate sensor, it showed that level 2 had higher tension than level 1. The big takeaway is that our model prediction consistently ranked level 2 above level 1 and level 3, which agreed with the PPG sensor and it agreed with our hypothesis too. The EDA readings, unfortunately, weren't as helpful. They consistently dropped across the levels for most of the participants. The reason why that happened was initially when they were hooked onto the sensors, we were assuming that they were quite excited, and as they played through the levels, they got calmer, and so the EDA sensors, the readings, they didn't end up being that useful. In the future, it would be nice if we had like a test level that got them used to the vibe, and then they played the 3 levels. Here's our results from the surveys. As you can see, in terms of tension, the participants ranked level 2 uh, over level 1 and 3. And similarly, they thought that level 2 was less calm than level 1 and 3. So again, this is agreeing with our model predictions that level 2 had the highest overall tension. So I did say that the EDA readings were not that useful when we were comparing the levels. However, from moment to moment, you can see that there is some strong correlation there, um, which um, which makes sense because the EDA readings, it means that when we were comparing them relatively, it made sense, but from levels to levels, they were not that useful. For future work, we used a very basic AlexNet model, but because this was an initial experiment, but it would be fun to see how sequence-based models like LSTMs or transformers would perform here. We believe that there's a potential there. Additionally, when we initially proposed this pipeline, I was really interested in AI directors, mainly from the one from Left 4 Dead, which had a dynamic difficulty adjustment thing going on. So we believe that we can um, we can use this model in the future to make an AI director that can see the tension and adjust the difficulty dynamically. Finally, here are the main takeaways again. We've proposed a label-free model using Let's Play videos. Our model readings strongly aligned with the survey results. The sensor results were mixed, but there was some correlation from moment to moment, but not from level to level. Any questions?